Welcome, Chiara Koto, to the talk. For those who know Zoe, it's very obvious that I'm not Zoe. I was very comfortable in having a very small background role in making this amazing conference happen. But I have the pleasure to supervise Zoe in her research at the Hitlab at the University of Canterbury. And Zoe is here. She went through a traumatizing flight into Wellington on Tuesday afternoon. She waited for more than 5 hours for her luggage that couldn't be unloaded because of the wind. And then she fell sick and she lost her voice. So I was happy to offer to lend her my voice. So please try to imagine that Zoe is here with you and that she just has a different voice. And Zoe is fantastic because she has very detailed notes, and I will read many of the things that she wanted to tell you. And she's been to GDC before in her role as UX designer, and she was very much looking forward to being here again, connecting to the community, learning, and also sharing her knowledge. So she's really, really sorry for not being here. Zoe's background is a designer and user experience researcher. She's studying this field for a number of reasons. One of these is that she finds cross-disciplinary work the most interesting, work that combines design, user experience, technology, and the social sciences. She made this transition from more traditional design, graphical and digital, to user experience design and research, as she was interested in understanding questions like, is what we are building the right thing? And how are users going to use and what we are designing? This led her to join the Human Interface Technology Lab, known as the Hitlab NZ in Christchurch, where I'm also coming from. So she was a master's student with us in 2018, and then she worked as a user experience consultant here in Wellington, and enjoyed connecting with people, talking about their stories and experiences, and using this to make better decisions. Zoe have had an ongoing interest in applied games and qualitative research to support design. As a brief agenda, she distributed what she's going to research in her talk in explaining her research questions, what is social anxiety and why she is studying this, what kind of games and VR applications do we have, and then her design plan. She's in the first half year of her research and has developed a lot of results already, but of course she hasn't designed anything yet. With the conference theme of being adept, Zoe had also her experience with needing to adapt. In 2020, she was working as a user experience consultant in Auckland, which involved working with a range of companies and government agencies, for example, working to understand the needs of recent migrants navigating government services, which of course something that she couldn't continue during COVID, and she had to reconsider her options. Zoe's past goal of returning to research and applied design called her name. She had always wanted to return to applied design research. By January this year, she was underway on her current topic. So where she's working now is the Hitlab NZ at the University of Canterbury. She's part of the Applied Immersive Gaming Initiative called AIGI, and me and Andy Phelps, who some of you might have met already, are her supervisors. I'm also leading this initiative. This is Zoe's words. And for Zoe, it's been great to see how this initiative has grown in the time since she was first at the lab in 2018 to today. She originally was one of few graduate students at the lab without an engineering background, but this has grown now, and the interdisciplinary nature of the work is really great. The AIGI is concerned with exploring games and how they connect with other domains. Some of the areas include rehabilitation, disaster response, now in superhuman sports, education, neurodiversity, and mental health, among others. The AIGI lives within the Hitlab NZ, the Human Interface Technology Lab. The lab is all about looking at how technology can support people. And this was something that Zoë also did in her master's work in 2018, which reinforced her passion for user experience and interest in doing future research in this area. Her research is cross-disciplinary. This is a very brief snapshot of some of the areas Zoë's work touches. From design, we have like game design, prototyping, co-design approaches. From technology, she's looking into VR, UX requirements and usability. And from the social sciences, she will look into how to apply qualitative methods, a literature review, working with scenarios, and some other methods from psychology. Her two main research questions are how might we design and evaluate a game-based approach for youth social anxiety? So this is very much about the design process. How can we approach the target group? How can we enable them to work with us? And then how can we adapt the design process to make it accessible for youth and people with lived experiences? So it's not so much focused on the end result, while of course we also want to get to a game in the end which is really helpful and effective, but her work is really much more about like how do we design and create a process which helps us to design such a tool. The disclaimer is this talk will of course include discussion of mental health and anxiety and depression, so I hope that you don't mind. Why is Zoë interested in that? And I will not go into like the details that are not here because it would be unethical to do that. But what Zoë found is that many of us fear public speaking more than death. And of course, these situations like this is something that most of us would be a little bit nervous about. But this is really something that was striking to Zoë. There is something that is called in literature the performance anxiety subtype. So this is really like a fear of situations like this or test situations where people are on display and where one may feel they are being evaluated by some others, often by people they don't know. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. Social anxiety, while not just fear of public speaking, impacts many. Zoë's work will focus more on the generalized form of social anxiety, so not so much on the performance subtype, which I will get into detail shortly. So what's social anxiety? Some anxiety, of course, is really helpful for us as human beings. It's like in our system to flee or to freeze. It helps us navigate the world and recognize potential threats. However, too much social anxiety can mean this potential threat response is amplified. We identify things as being more cause for concern than they may be. Generalized social anxiety is where this fear is more present than just in performance situations. For example, one with high levels of social anxiety can fear an upcoming social event, may be concerned with how they are viewed by others, worry about the physical symptoms that might present, such as blushing, stuttering, or sweating. A common feature of SAD is automatic negative thoughts one may have in the moment, or before or after. An example of such an automatic negative thought could be something like assuming you said a wrong thing in social media message to a friend if you don't get a reply quickly. Additionally, social anxiety can involve replying events or interactions that have taken place in detail, can be called rumination among many other terms. Social anxiety has varying rates depending on the paper or country you look at, but is one of the most widespread mental health conditions. It is estimated to impact over 9% of NZ adults at some point in their lives. SAD typically happens during adolescence, and that's why Zoë is also looking into children and young adults, and it might be the point at which someone first experiences SAD. This, as a quote, is saying that people who experience social anxiety disorder may try to avoid these situations that are anxiety-inducing. So a little bit of nervousness before a talk like this is normal, but still I go through it. People with SAD wouldn't do that. They would just avoid the situation. They may not be able to, or it may not be feasible, and in those situations, things called safety behaviors are often employed, which I'll talk about shortly. These are some of the features of social anxiety disorder from literature. So that is certainly not all of them, but avoidance and safety behaviors are amongst the typical ones. An example of safety behavior might be avoiding eye contact when in social situations such as a party, or sticking to talking to people you already know. Lack of treatment can lead to lower educational attainment and, as a very bad consequence, also to depression. The UK National Institute for Health and Care Excellence describes the distinction between generalized and non-generalized SAD, which is these quotes about. As you can see, non-generalized, or the performance type, can be related to fewer situations, with generalized more applicable to a variety of social situations or a variety of ways people worry they will come across in specific scenarios. So his work focuses on generalized SAD for a few reasons, including that there appears to be a number of work and studies already done in the area of performance anxiety specifically, such as VR applications for mimicking the experience of giving a speech to a room full of people. The proportion to the threat, and the list goes on, these are just a few examples Zoë felt were relevant. Social anxiety can lead to poorer educational attainment, reduced participation in social life, and limited life outcomes. Other conditions can also develop with it and following social anxiety. Depression is a common flow and effect of having social anxiety. Common treatments for social anxiety include typically medication and therapy. Medications that are often prescribed for anxiety are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors that change the chemicals in our brains, and a combined approach of medication and therapy. However, organizations such as the Royal New Zealand and Australian College of Psychiatrists recommend against prescribing medications for young clients because we just don't know about the side effects, or the side effects can be more severe, and it's really more difficult to deal with the side effects for the medication. Also, medication often does not address the underlying anxiety and the response to it. So it may be addressing symptoms, but not causes and responses to anxiety. In addition, a lot of caregivers also don't like their children or young adults being under medication for a longer time. Out of all the therapy approaches, the one that is mainly applied is cognitive behavior therapy, known as CBT. CBT includes a range of strategies that can variously address thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, such as the automatic negative thoughts one might have, their evaluation or how they performed in a particular situation, and behaviors to develop to address the fear scenarios and responses to stimuli. CBT often involves elements of exposure therapy to increase ability to tolerate feared stimuli and develop responses to these. Exposure therapy works by introducing people to what they fear, often done through imaginal or in vivo. Imaginal can involve asking the client to imagine certain scenarios or things. This may progress with representations of the feared thing until in vivo, in real life, exposure can happen by using skills developed for the situation you've been working towards, such as attending a particular social event or approaching someone new. So people identify what is problematic or anxiety producing for them, and then work to define steps or exposure types to progressively go through it. So why is Zoë looking into digital tools for social anxiety disorder? There are a number of challenges to accessing treatment or support for social anxiety. There are a few that are well established. Missing from this, but obviously important, is the impact things like COVID-19 had on our ability to access help in person. There are also challenges concerning stigma and the nature of social anxiety itself, in making it less likely for people to reach out for help. Dealing with someone new and discussing something so personal presents a lot of challenges. Additionally, more tangible aspects like how to get to appointments with limitations around work, school, and activity hours can present hurdles. This impacts many, but it is often underreported, so it's likely to be more widespread than we realize. It's a widespread condition, but often not interpreted for what it is. As it's an internalizing disorder, it can be difficult for others to know what's going on and the type of support that might be helpful. And what's coming now is important that these are Zoë's words, because I would never describe whatever like we discuss on a personal note. Zoë is interested in this partly from her own experience during adolescence, where what she would have needed was some practical suggestions to apply to her everyday life and to situations she was concerned about. Social anxiety can also be incorrectly interpreted as being aloof or shy, intentionally withheld. It was Zoë's experience that a few people viewed her as this, though really what she struggled with at the time was feeling unable to experiment socially and not feel a certain fear to socialize with people she didn't know. Such issues and motivations are why Zoë is interested in which tools currently exist for anxiety and how we might design more immersive and engaging tools in the future. Like in the first step of our research, what Zoë did was looking into existing tools. There's something that's called Internet Cognitive Behavior Therapy that essentially take concepts from CBT and put them in an online format. mHealth tools are mobile mental health tools, and more typically are a lot of apps out in the market. There are a number of commercially available tools, but lots of these are not explicit about the principles that they're using or are not specifically made for youth or teens. Often apps try to address too many things or are too general, and a few or make them less applicable for specific conditions. Some examples of ICBTs and apps for mental health include, not sure whether this is Brave, Sparks, Superbetter, Mentemia. I only know like one or two of them because this is really Zoë's work to like look into them and analyze the elements and details of all these apps. So if you're more interested in those things, you really have to reach out to her. Please do, she's really happy to do that. Generally, however, there are access issues with some and varying degrees of effectiveness for anxiety specifically. For example, meditation applications are not particularly useful for social anxiety as a standalone treatment, with CBT and exposure therapy being more effective. Specific tools for exposure aspects of SAD appear lacking. Superbetter and Sparks, among others, may prove useful for some aspects, but few address specific scenarios and behaviors. So we need more investigation as to which features online and app tools require in order to be engaging and maintain adherence to treatment. Looking at engagement and design features to support this is important. Then there are also games for mental well-being. And there are, of course, many positive impacts that games have in general, including entertainment games that are not purposefully made for mental health. Some of these include increasing our feelings of connectedness to others and bolstering our relationships. They allow us to interact with people in ways that may not be possible in our daily lives outside of games. Games can provide an environment when we feel more experimental, more willing to try things out because they are safe. Such aspects of games can provide a context where we can try different strategies and see which works, which could be beneficial for navigating social life. In treatment, developing strategies for the scenarios that are feared and then working to try things out in the real world is a common practice. Games allow us an avenue to do this in a way that has less social risk. Games are naturally engaging and are played by a high proportion of adolescents already. Some of the challenges, however, to video games concern antisocial behaviors as a result of gaming. However, Zoe already found that this in some cases been linked to existing challenges prior to uptake of gaming. For example, in one research work, they found that there was some tie to pre-existing participant characteristics. There's also inconclusive evidence as to whether playing games that depict violence leads to actual aggression. This describes the potential of what we call applied games or serious games that are made for a serious purpose, like helping people with mental health issues or a social anxiety disorder. This potential of game environments which may create states of flow provide a safe experimentation space and a rich sensory context. This is something Zoe aims for in her work by investigating which features may be appropriate for tools to assist with social anxiety. And again, there are some examples that she already found that are where Rewind, Flare, and Challenger are specifically for anxiety. But some are more like gamified apps, and all of them are not specifically made for children and young adults. And Zoe really wants to look into the immersive side of games, so not only like making an app, but really build on the characteristics and strengths of immersive environments. So she will focus on VR for now because there are just no augmented reality examples at the moment. And she's looking into how the existing tools apply their elements to anxiety and treatment. VR essentially refers to an immersive computer-generated 3D environment, in her definition, where a user can interact with the environment in a way that mimics aspects of reality, such as through touch and haptics. VR has been explored in the context of anxiety and psychology since the 1990s. One of the typical deployments of virtual reality for therapeutic purposes is in the use of virtual reality exposure therapies, also known as VRET. Virtual reality CBT is also common. VRT has been an object of research and therapeutic importance due to its effectiveness in offering clients a means of practice in a more evocative way than image-based exposures, as well as reducing barriers to access typical of more traditional therapy. So it's very appealing to a lot of people, but also there are some challenges. Despite VR exposure therapies being accepted as being effective and promising for practical use, it is widely unused in this context. When surveying clinicians working in mental health about their experience of VR, a large majority had not used VR in their work environment. However, a large amount of them believed anxiety would be the best use of VRET in their work. That is, of all conditions, VR exposure is the most promising for anxiety. Clearly, VRETs have a lot of potential for use in this domain, but there are barriers. Investigating usability and feasibility from a clinician perspective is important, and Zoe's work will do this by involving clinicians in interviews during discovery, as well as throughout the design process. While those with lived experience of social anxiety are the primary users and involved in co-design, including clinicians, is also important for the design effort and to gain a more nuanced understanding. So we appreciate that there has been a lot of info. Now I'll get back to the guiding question. How might we design XR game-based tools for social anxiety? How do we connect games with VR and the lived experience of people who experience SAD? So Zoe's plan for design is a rather complex one, and one that will be based mainly on co-design. Considering design in this sense as both to design with the group as well as design as an output. Not considering the perspectives of people with lived experience not only fails to gather important information regarding usability and usefulness, it also creates large resource wastages by designing for the wrong problems or designing tools that fail to engage or are inaccessible. So this is one of the definitions that Zoë found and that she will apply in her work. People will be involved in the design process as co-creators through a framework that considers this sense as described by Sanders and Steppers through several forms, such as during workshops, providing detail to inspire scenarios in interviews, being involved in prototyping activities, and giving feedback and direction on prototypes and artifacts as well as the final product. To do this co-design work, Zoë is looking to partner with community organizations working in mental health. And we already found one group that is working with young people with social anxiety disorder who are going to partner up with us. And Zoë is especially interested in working with people with lived experience of mental health challenges and those who support them as well as clinicians. Qualitative methods will help her to discover what is needed in such prototypes to be engaging as well as effective. Themes to inform this include barriers accessing mental health as well as barriers in using mental health services and products, use of technology, games, gameplay preferences, and connections with others, among others. I will use, or she will use, co-facilitation models, which will ideally mean participants will be familiar and comfortable with people that they already know. She will definitely use like prototyping together, feedback and insights on multiple points, which is really important, not just at the end of the design process, but throughout the whole design. She will also use co-design approaches for usability and evaluation, while some of the measures will still be to determined. There are many, and there are some that are limited to use only by clinical psychologists. Determining the correct one to use by both a systematic review that is in progress and through ongoing research and discussions with clinicians. Ideally, we would love to make connections with people who can serve as SMEs specifically for this and helping assist with the selection and use of such measures. Let Zoë know if you are one or know of someone who may be interested to work with her on helping people with social anxiety disorder. In the evaluation stage, it is the plan to provide useful tools for others who might want to develop tools in this space. Also, another plan is to share her findings on adapted design practice for co-design in this space with potentially vulnerable use. Who is involved? It's of course Zoë herself and her supervisory team, but she will also visit the Empathic Computing Lab in Auckland for a few months. So she will be in Auckland. So if you're outside of Christchurch, please get in touch with her. As I said, we are already in contact with one community mental health group, which are really excited about the project and really helpful and open. And that comes with like very own challenges towards their research, because Zoë will have to spend a lot of time first to like build the connections before she can actually start with her research. Then she will, of course, like evaluate whether her design is useful and usable and how people experience it. So she is at the moment conducting a literature review looking into existing tools and also looking into what kind of resources are out there to help people. So if you want to get in touch with her, please do so. Please give her feedback. And again, if like anything bothered you, then please like blame me and not her. And please like provide her with your ideas, questions, comments, whatever. Thank you very much.